So 1984 and the present day share a lot of similarities once you read into the book. The first similarity is that both the book and our current day hand like have to are like dealing with issues about refugees and how these refugees are escaping from war and how all these refugees are trying to like survive. Um, Unfortunately, uh, in the present day, one incident reports that up to 146 people have died in the latest refugee boat sinking in the Mediterranean Sea. In 1984, on a telescreen, Winston writes what he sees, and as a war film is playing, he reports how there was a refugee boat in the Mediterranean and how he saw a lifeboat full of children with a helicopter hovering over it, and how there was a little boy screaming with fright and hiding his head between his mother's breasts, and how just in seconds a 20-kilo bomb in among them, a terrific flash, and the boat went all to matchwood. So the first similarity is that obviously these refugee boats are in the Mediterranean Sea as these people are fleeing from turmoil from their home country. In present day, that's Libya. In the book, even though it is not specified, it's probably somewhere in that region where, just like in the present day, there is a lot of war and turmoil. Um, Likewise, it also talks about in the book how there were women and children on these boats and how they were tragically bombed. In this case, in present day, at least 5 children and several pregnant women were among those who drowned. So it also shows a similarity that women and children were on these boats, these like helpless people were on these boats, and how both of them highlight the tragedy of losing women and children because of war. Another similarity the book and present day shares, both of them deal with food rationing, food and supply rationing. So this account in the present day talks about how in Venezuela there's a shortage of supplies due to economic downturn. So one account of a woman explains how a tube of toothpaste costs half a week's wages and how she has to choose whether or not to brush her teeth only in the morning or night. This is similar in 1984 when the book states that the chocolate ration was to be reduced from 30 grams to 20 at the end of the present week, which is found on page 39. So both of these are similar in the fact that they both talk about how food and supplies are rationed in their like world. So in 1984, the government like rations out food and supplies for the people to use, while in Venezuela, these people have to ration out the food and supplies they use due to this economic crisis. So it both shows how like these people have to be wise in when they use the products they get and how they don't have unlimited supplies given to them and how they have to be smart about what they're using. Book and present day also talk about black markets, more specifically the food black markets. So it has been said in North Korea that there is a black market for food, electronics, housewares, and other staples, and how nearly 1 in 5 North Koreans depend on the commerce in these markets to survive. Um, this is also similar in 1984 when, in a conversation between Winston and Julia, Winston asks her where did she get this real chocolate and not like the chocolate made from the party. And then she answers him that she got it from the black market. These are similar in the fact that both in North Korea and in 1984, people are are on the black market selling food rather than things like drugs. Like um, food, which is a basic necessity, has become something on the black market and something that may be considered illegal, which is something that's not normal between in like other nations. But between North Korea and the book, this is very similar in the fact that there's a black market for food. Likewise, these the food that they both deal with are foods that are very like cheap and aren't really of value compared to like a solid meal. Like in North Korea, they handle street food, while in 1984 they handle chocolate. Both foods are very cheap and affordable, but the book and North Korea both make it something that is illegal and something that must be exchanged in the black market. 1984 and the present day also share a similarity on how minority groups are handled by the upper class. In the present day, there's a problem with the amount of tobacco and substance advertising in lower income neighborhoods, particularly in Boston, where it is prolific and prominent, especially with those neighborhoods with substantial African American and Hispanic populations. In 1984, it states how beer was the only drink you could get in Pole pubs. The Poles were not supposed to drink gin, though in practice they could get a hold of it easily enough. So both are similar in the fact that substance is very accessible to these minority groups that really make up a huge percent of the population. And it shows how people in the upper class do not care what these people do, especially in the fact that they do not care about the amount of substance they abuse. And they talk about how it is not really enforced on them, on how they can get substances. For like how the Poles aren't supposed to drink gin, but they do anyway, shows how the upper party does not care for these lower class people. In the real world, this is seen through the amount of advertising in lower income neighborhoods, which shows how the upper class do not really care that these people are being exposed to such bad things. Yet, in the upper class, these bad things don't really exist in advertising. So both show how the upper class has no regard for the lower class in what they do and do not really enforce anything upon them because they are the lower class and the upper class knows that they will be better. The last similarity has to do with how both the book and North Korea today handle capitalism. In North Korea, it is very well known that they are very anti-American and anti-capitalist, and they often make propaganda posters about destroying the U.S. and the U.S.'s capitalistic ideals. Also in the book, there's a diary that Winston copies from a passage that he finds about the party and capitalism. So it states that the capitalists own everything in the world and everyone else was their slave. And how capitalists were like these tyrants to the people and how they made people suffer. And the book that Winston copies onto his diary portrays capitalists in this very negative, tyrannical way, just like the North Koreans do with their propaganda posters. So both of them are similar in that they very much dislike capitalism. Likewise, both the book and North Koreans also have a very exaggerated approach to how bad capitalism is. They both portray capitalism as something very terrible and as something that should be destroyed or frowned upon at the most extreme level. So both the book and North Korea share very similar views on how capitalism is a bad thing in both of their society and cultures.